Today, the worlds of theater, film, and storytelling are united in a way no one ever wants to see. Because a legend, one of the rare minds who could bend language, history, humor, and heartbreak into something almost supernatural has left us. Tom Stoppard, the playwright whose imagination changed generations, has died at 88, and the reaction across Hollywood, Broadway, and the entire literary landscape has been immediate, emotional, and overwhelming. But to understand why this loss feels so heavy, you have to know where his story began. Because Stoppard's life wasn't the typical born to be an artist tale. It started in danger, displacement, and a journey that could have broken him before he ever had a chance to dream. He entered the world in 1937 as Tomáš Straussler, born into a Jewish family in Czechoslovakia world that was about to collapse. Under the weight of war, when Nazi forces advanced, his mother fled with her children, moving first to Singapore and then to India, desperately trying to outrun a darkness that consumed millions. His father never made it out. The loss, the fear, and the constant uprooting were the first chapters of his life. Imagine being a small child and watching your entire world dissolve. For most people, those early wounds leave scars that never fade. But for Stoppard, they sparked something else, a restless curiosity. A hunger to imagine new worlds because the one he knew was so fragile. By 17, he had left school entirely. No university lectures, no fancy writing programs. He became a journalist, then a theater critic, someone who observed stories before he ever dared to write them. But while other critics focused on what playwrights were doing wrong, Stoppard was quietly thinking about how he could do it better. He absorbed rhythms, ideas, performances, and slowly, a voice started forming. Sharp, witty, philosophical, fearless. Then in 1966, that voice exploded onto the world stage. His breakout play, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, took to tiny footnotes from Shakespeare's Hamlet and placed them at the center of an explosive, existential, absurd, and deeply human story. Audiences were stunned. Critics didn't know what to compare it to because nothing like it had ever existed. It debuted at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival and within months catapulted to the West End and Broadway. It wasn't just successful, it was revolutionary. It challenged the idea of what theater could be. It proved that stories could be intellectual without being cold, funny without being shallow, and wildly inventive without losing emotional truth. And instead of letting that success define him, Stoppard treated it as a launching pad. He ventured beyond the stage, bringing his talent into television, radio, and eventually the heart of Hollywood. Whether people realized it or not, they were witnessing the rise of a writer who would leave fingerprints on nearly every corner of the creative world. His biggest Hollywood triumph came with Shakespeare in Love, a film that brought romance, humor, and creativity together in a way that captivated the world. It swept awards season, earned Oscars, and cemented Stoppard as not just a playwright, but a cinematic storyteller whose influence stretched far beyond the theater seats. He once critiqued. He also worked behind the scenes on major films, polishing dialogue, shaping characters, and elevating stories in ways the public never knew. His contributions, sometimes credited, sometimes kept quiet, shaped entire projects. Directors and studios knew that if a script needed brilliance, you called Stoppard. But perhaps the most profound chapter of his career came later in life, driven not by ambition, but by personal truth. For decades, Stoppard rarely spoke about his Jewish roots or the family history lost to the horrors of war. It wasn't denial, it was distance. A childhood too fractured to fully grasp. But as he grew older, he began uncovering the pieces of his past, learning about relatives who never escaped, stories that were never told, and a heritage he was separated from by circumstance and tragedy. All of that reflection, grief, and rediscovered identity poured into his 2020 masterpiece, Leopoldstadt. Critics didn't just praise it, they felt it. Audiences described it as a play that refused to let you look away. It became one of the most emotional and resonant works of his entire career. In his 80s, Stoppard wasn't slowing down. He was sharpening. He was looking his past in the eye and turning it into art that left people breathless. That emotional depth made today's news even harder for fans, artists, and admirers to process. When it was announced that Tom Stoppard had died peacefully at his home, surrounded by his family, the reaction was immediate. Actors across Hollywood, writers across New York, directors around the world, they all felt the loss. Mick Jagger called him a giant. Others called him the mind that redefined modern theater. Broadway and West End theaters announced they would dim their lights, a gesture reserved for the rarest. Most irreplaceable voices in the arts. Messages poured in from creators young and old, even from those who were born long after Stoppard's early works premiered. Because his influence traveled across generations. His writing didn't age, it expanded. It's rare for one person to impact theater, film, philosophy, humor, and culture all at once. Rarer still for that person to do it for 6 decades. Stoppard didn't write plays. He wrote worlds. He didn't just entertain audiences, he challenged them. He provoked curiosity. He made people question love, identity, memory, fate, and the meaning of life itself. He made language feel alive. And now, as the world absorbs his absence, one thing is clear. Tom Stoppard's legacy will not fade. It will continue on stages, in classrooms, in film sets, in bookshelves, and in the minds of every writer who dares to experiment, to question, to push boundaries the way he did. Legends don't disappear. Their words echo. So as Hollywood reacts, as tributes pour in, as the lights dim in his honor, we're reminded that storytelling doesn't just survive people like Stoppard. It becomes greater because of them. Which of Tom Stoppard's works touched you the most? His plays, his films, or the ideas he challenged you to think about? Let me know in the comments. And subscribe because there are more legends whose stories deserve to be remembered.